Hello. Oh, you're... I think we need to switch. We're live right now. All right.
Sorry. Looks like
Hi,
we're gonna
everybody.
have to change our phone orientation. All right. There we go.
All right.
Hey everybody, we're Christian. I'm Christian Jones, and this is my wife Emily.
Hello.
And we live in Colorado, just about an hour north of Denver, and we've got 4 kids.
And today we have been asked by the High Five Live team to share an experience that we had where we felt that God had ignored our prayers, but He was really just saving my life.
So what we'd like to do before we jump into this story is, for any of you who are watching this, feel free to comment and tell us where you're from. We were kind of curious to see how far this message goes. You know, Emily had seen some stories from some people that she was inspired by, and it was kind of cool to see how broad that went. And I think that's what inspired her to reach out and share our story with High Five Live.
Yeah. So we have 4 kids, and when I was pregnant with our youngest, I went in a few days before my due date to be induced. And it wasn't a big deal because I had been induced a couple times before. But as the day progressed, the induction wasn't working. They put me on Pitocin, and even that afternoon they tried to break my water a couple times, and nothing seemed to put me into labor. We waited there the entire night. We spent the night in the hospital. The following morning was a Saturday morning, and they got permission to up my Pitocin to the highest levels. We were really hoping that it would work. I felt as though something wasn't right. I felt like something had to be wrong because this was my 4th child, and every other time it had worked really smoothly. And so my husband, Christian, and father gave me a blessing and just blessed me, a priesthood blessing that everything would be okay. And we waited a little bit longer with our hopes really high, hoping that things were going to get progressing. But by 7:30 that night, the doctor came in and she told me I had 2 options. I could either have a C-section, or I could go home and wait for my body to go into labor on its own. And having already spent about
36 hours?
Yeah, 36 hours in the hospital with our hopes up the whole time that a baby would be coming, it was really disappointing. But we felt that the best thing would be to go home and wait. So we went home, and I just felt so discouraged. And I felt like that God was trying to teach me a lesson about patience, maybe. And I had this honest conversation with God, and I just said, what do you need me to learn before I can have this baby? And I just was discouraged.
We had so we'd already spent a night in the hospital. We already had 4 kids, and so it was kind of strange that this baby wasn't coming. I already told all my coworkers that, you know, I was taking the next 2 weeks off, and then I showed up to work Monday without a baby, and we decided we just had to wait. It was a little frustrating, but, you know, there wasn't anything else we could do.
Yeah. So a few days later, I went back to see my doctor, and my blood pressure had spiked. And so now she said I needed to have a medical induction. And so on Wednesday morning, I went in to now have a medical induction. And we waited all day on the Pitocin. By midnight, I had still not progressed. And the doctor came in, and she told me that she really didn't feel comfortable having me on Pitocin any longer, and that I needed to have a C-section, which I didn't feel good about. And so I pleaded with her to just wait a little bit longer. I felt like maybe the contractions were starting to pick up. And she agreed that she would wait until 2:30 in the morning. And by 2:30 in the morning, she was going to do a C-section. we prayed with all of our might, and by 2:30 in the morning, she came to check me, and I had progressed just enough that she said I could keep waiting. And finally, labor started to kick in. By 6 o'clock in the morning, I had really painful contractions. I got an epidural. And by 7:30, the doctor who had been seeing us went home. And a new doctor came. And he came to introduce himself to me. And within a few minutes and 3 pushes later, our baby was here. It was so fast and so amazing that she came so suddenly and was healthy, and I was so grateful not to have a C-section. It was such a wonderful experience, and I had this moment of pure bliss.
It had been, was it like 60, 65 hours
65
or so
hours
we were in the hospital,
spent.
and we finally had the baby, and I think we were both in tears when our daughter finally came, and I just remember looking at Emily, and she was holding our baby girl and enjoying that moment. But then also noticing out of the corner of my eye that the doctor was still working to deliver the placenta, and he was working pretty hard to do so. I mean, he was pulling and tugging, and it was definitely different than with the other children we had had. And that continued for quite a while, and the whole time I noticed that there was still more and more blood coming out. It progressed to the point where I realized that this wasn't just odd, like maybe it's something to be concerned about, but there was like nothing I could do, so the only thing I decided to do was just keep staring at Emily and smiling so she could enjoy the moment as long as possible. But quickly the room got frantic as the doctor started asking for more and more people to come in. He needed someone to scrub in. He needed an anesthesiologist called in. He needed another doctor. He was asking for tools. And our room quickly just became completely packed with this beehive of activity. And Emily seemed oblivious to it, but I was really freaking out as to what was going on. And I noticed that there was, I guess, this bucket or something that was just full of blood at this point. And when I think it was maybe the anesthesiologist came in, and he looked in there and he looked at the doctor and he says, when are you going to call this? I'm thinking, call what? What would he call? It can't be good. Don't call it. But moments later, the doctor said, all right, everybody, we're going to the OR or emergency room or the operating room. And everyone that was in there grabbed something, unplugged something, and they just started wheeling Emily out of the room.
Yeah. It was bizarre. For 1 minute, I was having the best moment of my life. And then to realize slowly that everything was pure panic. And that they were now moving me into the OR. And I remember that as they wheeled me out, I looked up at Christian, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And I wondered, could this be the last time that I say I love you to him? And as they pushed me to the OR, the nurse looked down at me, and I said, is my life in danger? And she very honestly said, yes, it is. But these doctors are going to do everything they can to save you. And it was strange to feel so lightheaded, but to also feel so alive. This could be the last moments of my life. And you know how they say when you have a near-death experience that your life flashes before your eyes? My life didn't flash before my eyes. My kids' lives did. And I saw them growing up without a mother. I saw my husband raising these kids without a wife. I saw my baby never knowing me. And it was just, all I wanted was just to tell them all I loved them one more time. They got me into the OR, and my regular doctor, she arrived. And the last thing that I remember was her putting her hands on my face and saying, I'm going to save you.
It all happened so fast, and it was probably the worst moment of my life because I got left alone. They told me I couldn't come, and Emily was gone, and a nurse had taken the baby, and I was just in the room, and then someone came and got me and brought me to our baby. But I had no power to help at all, so I just sat in in the NICU and held our daughter for what seemed like forever. A friend texted us just to see how things were going. And, I wasn't really thinking of reaching out, but I'm glad she did, because I told her that, things were kind of rough and we could use some prayers. And so she spread the word among our friends and family to help have people pray for us. Eventually the doctor, well, it wasn't the doctor, I think a nurse or someone came back and said that they thought they would finish the surgery in about 20 minutes, which was a huge relief, because that I hadn't heard if she was going to make it. And 20 minutes later, the doctor came in and told me that Emily was going to make it, but the surgery was so rushed that they couldn't follow all the procedures that they typically do, and they didn't know if they had lost some equipment, some sponges, could have been inside her and stitched up. So he said I couldn't go in there yet. They had to do some x-rays and just see, what the state of things were. But eventually all that was taken care of, and I finally got to go see Emily right when she was waking up and coming out of that surgery.
And it took me a little while to wake up, but when I finally woke up, the doctor came in to see us. And it wasn't until we talked to the doctor that we realized the true miracle. I had lost so much blood. I lost 2 liters of blood and had 4 transfusions in order to save my life. And the doctor told us that because I was losing blood so quickly, that if he'd been alone, he wouldn't have been able to stop the bleeding quickly enough. That it was absolutely critical that there was another doctor on hand to help him do the surgery. And looking back at the 65 hours that we had spent prior in the hospital, thinking about the times that we were there, and the majority of it was in the evenings or on weekends, when only one doctor would have been there. An on-call doctor would not have been able to get to the hospital quickly enough to help with the surgery, and the outcome could have been very different. And, it's just interesting thinking about this experience and how frustrated and discouraged I was. All of those hours I spent wondering why God was not answering my prayer and what he was trying to get me to learn, when really he knew about this condition that I had, which is called placenta accreta. He knew that I needed to wait until precisely the right moment, when 2 doctors, 7:30 that morning, 2 doctors were there.
It was the first time really out of all the crazy time that we've waited, and none of the doctors understood why nothing was working. But if Emily had gone into labor at any other time, it's extremely likely she would have died. And here we were getting so frustrated that God was ignoring our prayers and just give us the baby, come on.
Yeah. My doctor, I don't know what faith she is, but she came to me and she said, I want you to know God was looking after you. And all of our nurses said the same thing. They had all been talking about what a miracle it was, that if I had had a C-section the night before, it would likely have been a very different outcome. And the lesson that we really learned from this is, so many times we think that we know more than God, and we think that we can advise him. And sometimes when we're waiting for an answer to our prayers, we may feel abandoned and we may feel discouraged when we don't receive the answer the way that we think we should, or when we think we should. But God has the bigger picture. He knows what we need. He knows what is best for us, and he has a plan for us. And we need to put our faith and trust in him, that he will take care of us.
I think it's just a great reminder that all those times when we're frustrated and we feel that maybe God isn't listening to us, or he's picking on us, or he doesn't exist, I think those are built into this plan on purpose, so that we can exercise faith. And it's only after faith and sometimes patience that we get to see it. And for some people, and for some of us, and for some times, I'm sure that we're going to have to wait a lot longer to really see how all the pieces fit together. But we're so grateful to have been able to see this miracle and how God formed all the pieces together despite our will, despite our praying, to give us what's best for us.
Yeah. Thank you, High Five Live, for letting us share this opportunity. If you don't know what High Five Live is, go check them out. Like their page. They're an awesome Facebook group that shares amazing experiences and songs and different inspirational things every day. And so go like their page. And thank you for letting us have this opportunity. And have a great night.
Thanks.